There are three main directions that we can follow. When we weave in yarn ends, we can do it horizontally, vertically, or diagonally. And I left these little tails hanging to show you exactly where the tail was hidden. So which way to choose? It depends on the stitch pattern. If you're hiding tails in garter stitch or reverse stockinette stitch, which is the purl side of stockinette stitch, then it's better to do it horizontally. If you're hiding tails on the knit side of stockinette stitch or in ribbing, then it's better to do it vertically. The diagonal method is great for projects that are stretched a lot, like hats, socks, or mittens, because this method does not interfere with the elasticity of the fabric, but it is the most visible of the three, so it's better to use it on projects that have a wrong side, where we could hide the tail without worrying that someone will see it later on. So how exactly do we weave in yarn tails? Of course, there is a gazillion of methods, but I'm going to show you the method that I use when I hide tails in my projects. The first step is to thread the tail into a wool needle, and it is better to choose the needle that is not too blunt, that is a little bit sharp, or if you're working with thinner yarn, it is okay to even use a large sewing needle. And I'm going to use yarn in a contrasting color to show you how the tail is hidden, but of course it is always better to hide the tail in the section of the fabric that is in the same color as the tail. So because I'm hiding the tail on the knit side of stockinette stitch, I know I will do it vertically. And when I look at the tail, I see that it is clearly slanting to the left. I'm not going to fight it. I'm not going to weave it in like this. I'm going to follow the natural slant of the tail and weave it in on the left side of the knot. Speaking of knots, you can leave it in here, or you can undo it, cross the strands and hide them without a knot. It's totally up to you. We go through 3 or 4 stitches, but we go actually through them. So the key is to split the yarn, and that's why it is better to have a needle that is not too blunt. So we go through the yarn, 3 or 4 stitches will be enough. And then we pull the tail through the fabric, which could be a little bit tricky when the yarn is this thick. But it's totally doable. The next thing we do is relax the fabric. So we pull the fabric along the direction of the tail. If you're hiding it horizontally, you will be pulling fabric like this, but I'm hiding it vertically, so I'm gonna pull the fabric like this. We do it to make sure we have enough tail in here and it does not pucker the fabric later on. The last step would be to go in the opposite direction. So we kind of make a U-turn. We go around the last strand that we visited and go make a few steps in the opposite direction. We can go through the stitches that are next to the stitches that we already kind of visited, but I usually go inside the same yarn tail like this. I go through it, and that's similar to what we do when we join yarn using the Russian join method, and then pull the yarn through, just like this. Then relax the fabric again. This way we do it to make sure that the tail is long enough and it's not gonna jump out of its hiding spot when the fabric is stretched. And trim this little tail, getting rid of the excess yarn. If you're working with wool, then you can make this process even faster, because in wool the tail is gonna get felted inside the fiber as soon as you start wearing the project, the sweater, hat, or whatever it is. And that makes it safe to make just 2 steps in one direction, just go through 2 stitches, that would be enough, and go one step back in the opposite direction, and that will make the hiding spot much smaller, neater, and less visible, and also less bulky, just as I did over here. See, this is where I hid the tail using the regular method when I go through 3 stitches, and this is a shortened version where I went just through 2 stitches and then made one step back. As you see, it is much smaller and even less visible, which is totally great. Of course, you can see it because it's in a different color, but when you're hiding the tails in the same color, it is not visible at all. For more tips about weaving in yarn ends, get the full tutorial at 10roseday.com/weave-in-ends. Happy knitting, my friend. I'll talk to you in the next tutorial.